Hi, I am Büşra Acarsevim, a psychiatry trainee living in London for the last 6 years, but I'm originally from Turkey. I make interviews with doctors from the UK and also from various other countries, and I also share my personal experiences about being a doctor in the UK to guide others. Because I'm working in psychiatry, I've been meaning to invite mental health professionals to discuss various topics related to psychiatry and psychology as well. So I'm really grateful that Dr. Puder accepted my invite for this episode. He is the host of the famous Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast, and the website address is psychiatrypodcast.com. I put the link below as well. Since I've started working in psychiatry, I've been listening to his podcasts regularly and learned a lot from those. I invited him as I thought his knowledge and wisdom can be helpful for my audience as well. We talked about his career path, how he decided to become a psychiatrist and psychotherapist. We talked about empathy, burnout, how to reduce it, Viktor Frankl, giving meaning to difficulties, forgiveness, microexpressions, and many more interesting topics. I really enjoyed recording this, and I hope you enjoy listening to it too. So here we go. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you. So I just want to briefly introduce you, but feel free to jump in and correct me if there's any mistakes there. So you're a psychiatrist and psychotherapist from USA. Originally, you were trained in California. Now you recently moved to Florida. Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, and you did psychoanalytic psychotherapy training for 2 years. And as far as I know, you've been practicing as a psychotherapist and psychiatrist with like psychopharmacology. And you were also involved in teaching medical students and residents. And you're also the host of this famous psychiatry and psychotherapy podcast that I'm a fan of.
I appreciate your encouragement that you've given me.
Thank you. It's all real. So I love listening to podcasts, but not every podcast is as good as yours. Honestly, I learned so much from you. I see you as my kind of honorary mentor and kind of supervisor further. Although, obviously we don't have direct supervision, but I learned a lot from your podcast. It really improved, I think, my practice, my understanding of a lot of psychiatry concepts. And these could be sometimes hard to understand, but you explain them in such a nice way. You simplify them, but also you gather a lot of, research evidence. So it's very valuable, very useful. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, well, I enjoy it, and it gives me a lot of meaning that people like yourself have reached out to me and told me that they find it meaningful. And I started it with the thought that I wanted to, make an impact in the world, educating people on psychiatry and also encouraging people to study psychotherapy who are just more biologically oriented. And I think it's doing that. So Definitely. It's very satisfying.
Definitely. I think, it was much needed podcast and like you're affecting the next generation of doctors, which is very, very valuable, very, very useful. So should we kind of start the questions, or did you want to add to the introduction anything else you want to tell about yourself or the podcast?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay. So first of all, I want to hear more about your career path. I know you have this very good summary of your kind of CV in your website, but it will be interesting to hear more about, how did you decide to become a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and like, do you want to summarize your career journey, and like, how is it to be, a psychiatrist and psychotherapist in USA, and just briefly summarizing your experience would be really helpful.
So initially I was not thinking psychiatry, psychotherapy. I went into medicine, not exactly knowing what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I spent some time overseas doing some orthopedic surgery in Dominican Republic, Haiti over my first year, sort of medical school, the second year between them. And went back during my second year. And then I realized in the midst of that my mentor there was amazing and I loved him, Dr. Scott Nelson. He's in Haiti currently. But I really enjoyed the interpersonal interactions I was having with the Haitians, the Haitian residents. There's Haitian medical students out there. And so because of that, I was thinking, well, maybe I'm built more for something that's like conversational. So I was thinking internal medicine. I loved internal medicine, loved pediatrics. So I actually applied med peds,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up, being kind of rerouted into a transitional year for a year and not really knowing what I wanted to do. And um, I was sort of running away from psychiatry. It was something I was really interested in. Like I was, going into med peds, reading about motivational interviewing, thinking about behavior change, thinking about psychological aspects of it. And I was talking to people on the interview trail about that stuff, and they kind of like looked at me like, "What is this guy talking about? Like none of us are into this, you know?" And so I really found like one of my best friends was a psychiatry resident, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I was running away from it at first because I was afraid that they were going to be too much like my family members, so to speak. And but ended up in psychiatry. And then why psychotherapy? Well, I had a really good mentor
Mm-hmm.
early on, Dr. John Tar, who was a psychoanalyst and just a brilliant thinker. And at first it was a total foreign language for me.
Yeah.
Like I was just trying to understand, like, what is he talking about? Like I just didn't get it. Um, and so I read books and I tried to figure it out. And I think it was his mentorship that really sort of ignited my
Mm-hmm.
interest in like psychotherapy. And then the books that I read, I was like, oh, this is very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to hear. And it's very interesting. I had kind of a bit similar experience. I went into general medicine, internal medicine first. And again, I was very interested in psychiatry, but I was a bit afraid of it, like feeling it will be a bit too much emotions. I think that's how like empathic people feel. They are actually very well suited for psychiatry, but it can be too much. But now with hindsight, I think I realized you learn to control it. Would you agree? Like,
Yeah. I remember coming home from the inpatient hospital being so exhausted, feeling more depressed than I've ever felt. And I was just like, God, why does this exhaust me? Well, I was just
yeah,
picking up on all that suicidal stuff. And to this day, like inpatient psychiatry is just not for me. It's just too much, one after another, suicidal people. I just get really, 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 really affected by it.
yeah,
And you build up a muscle over time
mm-hmm,
of
definitely.
being less affected by it. But it's like if you are an empathic human being, it can be really hard early
Yes,
on.
yes, definitely. And it's validating to hear that because I feel the same about inpatient psychiatry. But currently in my rotation, I'm doing child and adolescent community psychiatry with outpatient, and it's totally different. So, the
Mm-hmm.
cases are not that severe. There's more hope. So it's, you feel that hopelessness in the patient if they've been so chronically unwell for like maybe 30 years and they're also acutely unwell. And I can also feel like I usually feel very exhausted after hearing, especially, all these horrible stories. But I think, giving meaning really helps. Something I learned from your podcasts, actually. So, I really enjoyed the episode about Viktor Frankl. That's how I heard the book, actually, and I read it, and I really enjoyed it. So I think, having supervisor like you, even if it's through online channels, it helps us to understand, it's normal to feel that way, especially initially. And also you teach ways to overcome this burnout, as you explained in your intro. It definitely helped me improve, my skills in psychiatry definitely, and to reduce the burnout. And it made me even more motivated to learn more about psychiatry. When I listen to one of your episodes, it will ignite for me to read more. For example, I was also like, I didn't understand psychodynamic psychotherapy at first, but you had an episode about it that really helped me to understand better. And I trust you. I trust your opinion. So I thought if Dave Puder approves this, that must be good. So I realized I think people who are psychoanalysts, they are quite wise and they understand life really well. Maybe that's why you really enjoyed Dr. Tar's perspective of life. Would you agree?
Yeah, and just the way he would word things, like a lot of that comes through, and I've internalized a lot of the way he words things and decreasing the shame. And then, when you do your own work, I've had 3 different therapists that I've seen over time, and the more psychodynamic approach, the more less prescriptive, less advice, approach is kind of what I have found helpful. I can't stand it when my therapist gives me like direct advice. Like it's like, I can always find ways on why what their advice is doesn't make sense, and so it doesn't feel empathic. And it feels like a form of criticism almost, like, well, if it was that easy, of course I would be doing it already.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
sometimes there are lots of people who likes giving unsolicited advice, like it's just human nature, I guess, and I can empathize with that. People love giving advice, but it's not nice to receive them always.
well, it's just like I live in my body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And for someone to think that they have advice that's good for me, it's like, it can be like, well, they don't really understand. Right. And so I think that lack of empathy is almost painful at times. And then, I had this one early on therapist who I would tell her like, hey, I don't really want advice. And then she kept giving me advice. And it was like, it's like, that's not working for me. And I would tell her multiple times, and then I just left, because her advice was like very, I don't know, it's prescriptive. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, if it's not, I guess, directed appropriately to the person's circumstances, a bit like maybe not so helpful advice, especially.
So, what is what is a more psychodynamic orientation? It's like paying attention to the emotions, empathy, your connection with the person, like commenting or talking about what's going on in the room between you and the person. And, exploring things without shame, exploring difficult memories together without shame, trying to lessen the shame. That's the good stuff. So it's, when most people think like more of a psychoanalytic, psychodynamic perspective, they think of Freud, and they think of kind of like a caricature of Freud. They don't really know or understand that most of the things that Freud said, we've adopted into our way of thinking in the Western world. And what did Freud say? Freud like didn't have a lot of original thoughts. If you go back into the history of psychiatry, I have to do a series on this.
Yeah, definitely, please.
Like there's tons of people, like even the id, super ego differentiation, that other people had talked about that before.
Yeah.
Even the dreams, the way he talked about dreams, if you read his interpretation of dreams, he's basically going through all of the historical people who have talked about dreams. And it's like he's synthesizing this. So, people rag on Freud and they don't understand it, and they rag on psychoanalysis as if it's like not evidence-based medicine, but there's a lot of evidence that supports psychodynamic approaches and CBT, so both are good. But what I would say is that it's not about modality, it's about the person.
Yeah.
And it's about, is this person empathic? Is this person able to handle countertransference well? And does this person know how to connect? Those are really the fundamental things. You can't get those in a textbook.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to experientially learn those things to some degree. So it's like, it's a lot more difficult to learn how to be a good psychotherapist than to learn how to be a good orthopedic surgeon or a good internal medicine doctor. It's like, it's very difficult, actually.
Yeah, it's not just about knowledge. I agree.
Yeah, I don't think it's knowledge may actually decrease your empathy. if you feel like you know better than the person that's in front of you.
Yeah.
Um,
Or putting them
so
into a box sometimes.
put them in a box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of sort of psychological. I have such an issue when I read so many things because it's like pop psychology idea that's like taken as a fact. And it's very like dichotomous thinking, like black and white thinking. It's very prescriptive. It probably says more about the person than it does about the actual idea.
Yeah, definitely. We all have bias, obviously, but if you are less informed, I guess bias is probably stronger. Would you agree?
Without both experience, learning, mentors, supervisors, your own therapy, it's like you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
And those are the things that you get in trouble with, right? It's like the things that you don't know, you can refer out to, but the things that you don't know, that's what gets people into trouble.
Definitely. Yeah, it's really hard to overcome that. That's why we need good supervisors. Yeah, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I can sense that from, listening to your podcast and through, kind of knowing you from social media, etc. Like I can sense you really love your job, you're passionate, and you're happy to be a psychiatrist. But I still want to kind of hear it from you. Like, would you have chosen this path again? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Sometimes I'm like, I'm done with my day and I'm like, I can't believe I get paid for this. And it's like, because I listen to a lot of people's stories and a lot of people are very unhappy with their work, and I'm very satisfied. And I know that you can be a psychiatrist and be unhappy as well. Usually it's not because of the actual work. It's because of like the work environment or your boss or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, I'm very content.
That's perfect. Yeah, I agree. Like, obviously, especially when you're going through residency, you have different rotations and there are difficult days. But there are lots of things I would have done voluntarily, happily, like knowing about all these life stories and helping them in any way that we can. Yeah, it's very satisfying, very privileged place to be.
When I feel a connection with people, I feel it feels incredible.
Yes, definitely.
So it's like being good at it, I think, gives me a lot more dopamine throughout the day. Like if I'm good at listening and empathizing and making the person feel better, they start to feel better. They start to feel connected. They actually feel pleasure when they feel connected.
Yeah, definitely.
So that gives me pleasure as well. And then you feel their gratitude.
Yeah.
And gratitude feels great, so
yeah, definitely.
I think that's the difference between outpatient and inpatient. Inpatient, it's like, good luck feeling gratitude.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like much harder.
Yeah, I started my psychiatry with an inpatient rotation, and it was intense initially, but I also found it very rewarding to see people get better from the acute crisis in a couple of weeks. So, you have a manic patient who come very unwell, they are not like themselves, and then them improving in a couple of weeks and completely recovering. It was amazing. I never experienced anything like that in any other forms of medicine. Like I never got that satisfaction. Like when you treat a pneumonia, it never felt like, as if you are giving their mind back. It's just treating their CRP and, they feel a bit better, but it's not as different as, literally treating their mind.
Yeah, and that's I think that's something unique to people who go into our field. I think people who treat pneumonia, I think they probably feel some great satisfaction from that as well. But I think you were absolutely right. There's something about helping a manic patient like come out of the mania, like they were connecting quantum physics with, the Mayan calendar, and they left their kids on the side of the road to try to get treatment, and now you are the one that's helping them. And they get back put together to a place where they could take care of their kids again.
Yeah.
And it's very gratifying.
Yeah, definitely.
I sometimes will have, like, because of the podcast and because of my people reach out to me with these very, very difficult cases. And I'll take on some of them just because in my mind it's like, okay, if I can help this person get from a psychotic state into a place where he's stable, from the connection that I'm able to create, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I can maybe get them to a place where they can activate their potential.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. I can sense it's obvious that you're really passionate about helping others. And I think psychiatry is lucky to have you. Definitely. I think you made the right choice.
I'm lucky to have the mentors that I had, honestly. I attribute a lot of who I am to my mentors and the many internalized people that are now inside of my brain,
That's very modest of you to say.
Well, I think, there's some unique things that I've stumbled upon, but a lot of it is just I was blessed with good mentors, like the microexpression thing. I kind of stumbled upon that. That was kind of something unique. The use of it in psychotherapy.
Yeah,
there was no one talking about it before I started talking about it.
Yeah, I never heard it anywhere else. Yeah, and it really is fascinating. Do you want to talk a bit more about the microexpression?
Just there's flashes of emotion that happen on someone's face, and from those flashes of emotion, we can read what emotions are going on inside of them. And so, there's this guy, Paul Ekman, who had this TV show, Lie to Me.
Yeah,
I watched it. Yeah. He's using it to sort of the I gotcha moments with criminals,
Yeah.
But I took some courses online to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started just paying attention to it. And then I built like an app called Emotion Connection for iOS. It's for Apple's devices only.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm building an online training platform.
That's great.
Which is I'm like working on videos. I have like about 5 hours of videos so far where I'm doing training, and then you take tons and tons of these little tests where you show like 5-second clips of emotion and you learn how to guess it. So the hope is that it's like one little way of cueing into someone else's experience other than your own.
Yeah, definitely. And well, this made me think is, in psychoanalytic therapy, there's also this version where you don't actually see the client. What are your thoughts about that? Like I know in your practice, it sounds like you value empathy a lot and microexpressions a lot. So it seems a bit like the opposite.
Yeah, I've actually done some of that work with the analysts that I've worked with, where I lie on the couch and I don't look at them, and I find it valuable for me to be able to turn off my monitoring of the analyst.
Okay.
Because otherwise I'm reading their microexpressions and I'm in their experience and not in my own. So I need to exit out of their experience to some degree to kind of like get in touch with what's going on inside of me. So yeah, I would say, most analysts don't do the couch anymore. There are some who do, but from my experience, it's like sometimes they'll do it, sometimes they won't. I like the face-to-face.
Yeah, it's a bit different in the virtual world as well.
Yeah, I used to not think that I would like Zoom, but now I'm doing everything by Zoom. I do coaching worldwide, and then I do like psychotherapy in the states that I'm licensed in, and it's like I've gotten used to it. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, like all of us, like initially it was a bit difficult.
Yeah, I would have never done it.
Yeah, so I never thought I could have done my job remotely. So here we are, though.
Yeah, 100%. I would have never done it. I hated it, actually. I tried telepsych a little bit and I just hated it. And now it's like every single one of my patients, I don't even have an office.
Yeah. It was probably good for you because you moved to Florida now and you can still have some of your old clients, I suppose.
All my old clients, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Or the ones that I saw in my private practice, like I had my cash pay practice. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to talk about, we touched on the microexpressions, but other than that, what suggestion you would give to like doctors or medical students to improve their empathy? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, one is to start to learn how to practice it actually. So just like listening to, I mean, like if you're really like, some people have like survived through empathy, right? So like, I think I used empathy growing up in order to be a peacemaker in my home. And I used listening, and I used, reading other people. So for some people, it's very like intuitive. They started when they were like one, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
those people probably need to get in touch with their own emotions too, right? So that's like a different set of
Yeah.
issues. They need to learn boundaries. They need to learn
Mhm.
how to have a voice, kind of get in touch with their own internal experience because they're so used to reading other people. Um, the but empathy can be increased, and there's like little tricks, or there's some little tricks, but also like I think like we have to think through what are all the issues that get in the way of us having empathy for someone.
Yeah.
And so we have to be in a dialogue with ourselves, like, oh, why was it hard for me to have an empathic immersion
Mhm.
in this patient's experience?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think it was because, I am blah, 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 right? I'm jealous maybe of their success.
Mm.
Um, it's like when you tell people in your hometown, like, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm in England, they might not be excited for you.
Yeah, I see your point.
And
Yeah.
why aren't they excited for you? You're doing awesome, right? It's because there's jealousy. They feel stuck. It's like immediately they phase shift into their own experience, right? So I saw someone post like, the people who are really happy for me are the people who aren't from my hometown. And it's like, yeah, I think Jesus said that too, right? About Nazareth, the
Yeah.
people at Nazareth wanted to stone him or something like that. So I think like, jealousy can get in the way of our empathy, resentment towards past people, right? So if you feel resentment towards your mother or your father, and this person reminds you of your mother or your father, it's like, boom, you're going to have resentment towards them. It's going to come out, and it's going to be impossible for you to remain empathic. So there's often people will say, oh, I'm very empathic, but they might not be experienced empathically because of all the other baggage that they bring to the table as well, So some people with high affective empathy, meaning that they feel in a mirror neuron experience into other people's reality, they may need to train their ability to do that.
I see. Yeah.
And to do it accurately.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
supervision, their own therapy, and even a spiritual practice can help as well. A good healthy spirituality, like forgiveness,
Yeah.
forgiving the people who have wronged you in the past, overcoming resentment, overcoming bitterness. How much of your emotional energy are you spending thinking about someone else from your past? If it's more than like 5%, you probably need to forgive.
Yeah, makes sense. I was about to ask that. You kind of answered, like how do you overcome that resentment? But if, as you said, maybe you forgive that person you are resenting to.
Maybe you have some compassion for yourself. Maybe you have decreased shame in having that feeling. So at least now it's conscious. And then, maybe next you forgive. And forgiveness is like saying that, what it's not between you and the other person. So you can continue to not trust that other person or have that other person in your life. But forgiveness is like saying, no, I'm going to release my resentment. And I consider it like a spiritual practice. Even if you're not a spiritual person, you can have a spiritual practice of forgiveness because it's in every religion. Forgiveness is central.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's something that the data supports. I have an episode on it. I think there's a lot of data to support the importance of it.
Yeah, I listened to that as well. I listened to all your episode at least once actually. Forgiveness was quite like a good one. I really enjoyed that as well. So obviously, we talked about empathy, and I think there is some correlation between burnout and empathy. You probably explain it much better than me. I know you have a lot of episodes about, reducing burnout. But if you wanted to kind of summarize how to reduce burnout for doctors and maybe also for mental health professionals, how would you summarize?
Well, first of all, a lot of studies show burnout is because of the system, the medical system you're in. So it's not always blame the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of burnout studies where they've been successful at decreasing it. It's like changing the system, giving more support to the doctors. But we can't often change that. So we're left with like more of like a Viktor Frankl, like how do we our final choice is to choose how we're going to respond to the environment.
Yeah.
So can we practice a way of responding to the environment that is such that is going to lead to a sense of meaning and purpose in what we do? So a lot of burnout is a lack of purpose and meaning in what we're doing. So it's like a lot of the people I talk to who are burned out, they somehow start thinking that they're doing their job for their boss and they don't like their boss. And so it's like, it's miserable to do their job. Well, so we try to reframe it as in like, okay, we're doing why did we go into medicine? We went into medicine to help people. Okay. Are we helping people? Yes. Okay. So cherish those small moments of helping people, right? So getting back to the meaning of what we're doing. Our empathy will decrease if we're burned out. But if we practice empathy and we experience more gratitude from our patients and see the meaningfulness of the work that we do, I think that does help us.
Definitely.
So I think it's through the connection with the patients that we have, the small moments of transformation. Sometimes it's hard for people to see the change. So that's where it can be helpful to maybe do some sort of outcome questionnaire. There's like an OQ45 outcome questionnaire 45, see the change in the number over time, or touch base with the patient and ask them like, well, how have you changed? If they're more narcissistically oriented, the patient will not thank you.
Yeah.
They'll think something else like, oh, I think it was the medication, or oh, it was the genetic test. They won't actually see that the therapy, the human connection actually made the difference. That's part of the trickiness of this all, right? It's like, okay, the human connection is actually going to be part of the majority of the healing component of what's going on between us. But how do we value that? Because some people, it's like ethereal, it's like abstract, they're disconnected from it. You go and you spend in America $40,000, $60,000 a year on your education. But the thought of spending $10,000 a year on therapy is like, you're out of your mind. Where it's like, what is the better education, right? It's like getting the best supervisor possible, or getting the best therapist possible, and making a sacrifice financially.
Yeah, it is expensive.
So, yeah, and I've been there. I spent a lot of money on therapy, both for me and my wife, because we value it. And it's like my wife can tell if her girlfriend has had a lot of therapy or not. It's like, how psychologically minded is she?
Yeah.
How, after a lot of therapy, you can better understand people, you can better hear people, you can better empathize. And so it's like, she can tell. So in a couple, one member is growing psychologically, the other one needs to as well. Because then it's not just, you're not then alone,
And to maintain the equilibrium, right?
Well, there's this sort of thing that goes on when one of the member grows and the other one doesn't, right? So you both have to continue to grow somehow. So both. So luckily in my marriage, we both value this journey, right? The growth journey, so to speak.
That's great. This reminded me of your hero's journey. Do you want to kind of summarize that as well? To ignite some interest on the listeners. I would highly recommend that episode as well.
So the essential thing is that in every good story, in every myth, there's a character who's living a comfortable life and they're called into something else. And sometimes they're helped by a guide, equip them, and then they go into this other world and they face trials and tribulations and they overcome and then they go back into their ordinary world and they bring a gift back to share. And essentially that's, we're all going through this journey ourselves. You know, being in psychotherapy is kind of like that. You're going into your unconscious. And actually, Joseph Campbell, who talked about the hero's journey, he talks about that quite a bit, the psychoanalytic tradition of going into the unconscious, facing those things, and then coming back into the world with a gift to give. So, you know, psychotherapy training, being in psychotherapy, being in supervision, it kind of like you go into this alternative world of the mind and human complexity, of experience, and then you come back and you have a gift to give society. A lot of times, you know, it's like there will be multiple of these cycles in life, the way that I see it. So you may reach one, you may overcome one cycle, you may come back into the world, and then you may be thrust back into it again. You know, something difficult in your life happens, and it's like, you know, how can you catabolize this thing and then later utilize it in the work that you do?
Yeah. And you have multiple mentors. You know, obviously, you know, in usual films you have like maybe one mentor, but probably, you know, in real life you might have various people help you through your journey.
Yeah, a multiplicity of guides. Yeah, I would hope. And plus, some guides may be like, you know, people that you don't have a personal relationship with, the way that YouTube is, the way that podcasts are, you know.
Definitely, yeah. I see you as one of my guides, definitely.
Yeah, and you know, you've reached out for some supervision type, you know, coaching type thing, and so we did a session. So it's like some of my listeners now that I'm like freed up with more time, they're reaching out to me, and that's been fun.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that you know, we put a lot of weight in the relationships, specifically in this field that we're in.
Yeah,
and the
very
guides
valuable.
are very important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's almost a bit of luck as well. But thanks to technology, now we can find supervisors that are more suited for us. You know, at work, you can't always choose your boss, but, you know, there are lots of now information guidance out there. So if you're willing, there is help available, actually.
Yeah, and you know, the way I would say it is like, of the supervisors that you do have, make the best out of each one, right? Like each person has a gift to give.
Yeah.
And so like one of my supervisors was super good at, you know, bipolar psychopharmacology. It's like, okay, so I'm going to try to get all of that goodness, you know, like Dr. Cummings is like, for me, he is one of my supervisors. I consider him one of my supervisors. I get free supervision because he's on my podcast, but he's world class. He's like literally one of the top 5 psychopharmacologists of our day and age. You know, he's like one of the top 5. And
he's very knowledgeable. Yeah.
Stephen Stahl even looks up to him. He's published books with Stephen Stahl and papers and stuff. And he's very humble. He doesn't want the limelight. He doesn't want money from the books. He co-publishes with Stahl. He's funny. You know, he's on my podcast for free, but he's a guide, right? And he's a guide to many thousands of people now.
Yeah.
So so yeah, we can find different people for different little needs that we have. And you know, it might not all be the same person.
Yeah, definitely. You know, sometimes our patients can be a guide as well, right?
Our patients, we can learn a lot from our patients. Yes, I would hope that our patients, from their stories. I mean, every patient that I have makes me a little bit more psychologically minded.
Yeah.
They surprise me, they teach me, they instruct me, and they give me feedback, right? So I'm always asking for feedback. I'm always trying to accept that I might be wrong, that I might have the wrong hypothesis, that I might. Just the other day, I've seen this patient a lot, and she corrected me, and I realized, like, okay, my own bias is slipping in, my own emotions, you know, and I'm missing her, right? And so I think it's good to stay in a humble place where we can be wrong and be corrected, and then be excited with them, to be great, you know, full of gratitude that they would correct us, that we could then reconnect, right? Because it's like our goal is to reconnect, our goal is to connect. And so if they give you information for that, then you are grateful towards that goal. So it's a little bit of a mind shift from feeling it as like a critical thing to a good thing.
Again, giving meaning, isn't it? it's hard to get negative feedback, but I remember in one of your episodes you mentioned I actually feel happy when my residents give me kind of like a negative feedback, because it shows that you're approachable. And I was actually really surprised, because it's so rare to actually have people who would be so welcoming to like any criticism. And I could sense you're very genuine about this, so that's very valuable.
I have to be honest, not always. Sometimes feedback can kind of sting, right? So it's
Yeah.
like but then I have to shift my mind back into this mindset that like connection is the goal. People feel disconnected, and so I have to be open to being wrong, be open to being taught something I don't know, and and in our cult day and age, I think that's 100% needed, especially as we like sort of talk within multiple cultures. The other day I used the word that my brother was helping inner city kids, and one of my listeners told me that that's offensive to her community because that denotes that these are like colored kids, and then there's sort of the white messiah complex going into the color kids place to help them. And I said, thank you for that feedback. I haven't learned this before. I'm glad I know this now. I'll try to change my word usage. And so I'm learning about different people's perspectives on things. There's so much I don't know, and I'm out there talking a lot. And so I'm going to say things that are inevitably offensive. And so I try to learn while still being truthful, right?
Yeah. It's hard work to put yourself out there, definitely. And not everybody would understand, it's impossible to be perfect. And what you're doing is very valuable. And as you said, like everyone will make, even if minor mistakes. I think as listeners, they need to be also imperfect, how hard it is to create content. To best your but it's good to be corrected, and it's good to be able to receive that. Definitely, it's very valuable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think people can it's like, I think I've spent a lot of time in my own, doing therapy, not offending people unnecessarily. So hopefully I'm better at it over time. But, there's still things where I'm going to learn. I'm not reading everything. I don't know everything, and so it's good to continue to learn. And, you get feedback and you're like, there's this one person who's my listener and they're offended by this. They probably like most of my other content. They're offended by this. So I'm going to take the time to learn from this person. And that's going to sort of recreate connection. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, and maybe I think it's harder when they're imputing intent on you. Right. So if this person said, you are using this word because you blah, 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 then, and it's imputing sort of a negative, nefarious intent on me. That's a little bit like, that's a degree up, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, now this person is, but I see that as more of like attachment speech. This person wouldn't be telling me this if they didn't care. And they care because they feel a thwartedness in the attachment. So can we blur our eyes to the words that are said a little bit and just hear the intent from them is, I feel disconnected and I want to reconnect, but I don't know how. And this was very distressing for me.
Yeah.
Now, there are some people, of course, who are psychopathic, and I'm not talking about those people.
So would that be count as like a transference in psychoanalytic terms?
There could be transference, yeah. And people can have transference to people who are public speakers. Look at Trump. It's like every person has transference, positive or negative, towards Trump.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, yeah, people have immense transference towards people they don't even know. Right. So transference is the sum of your emotional reaction to someone, but also being informed by your past. So a lot of people have had past experiences, and then they take those past experiences and they put them on someone else, right? So it's not just Trump, it's like Obama, every political figure people have transference towards. So it's like, how aware are people of their transference? And then, not to not to make less of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the real things that that person could have said, and the real things and how they could have been offended, or the real, you know, that's not to make less of that, by the way.
Mm.
So it's like, it's just in addition to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely.
I'm sure some people have positive and negative transference to me. Um, and you know, people can have competitive transference where they feel a little bit competitive with someone successful. I feel competitive towards other men who are super successful podcasters, more successful than myself,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And it's
Yeah.
like,
It's
I'm,
natural. Yeah.
it's natural to have that, right? So
Yeah.
just becoming aware of it, and then being like, oh, okay, what does that say about what's going on, you know, inside of me? And then becoming conscious of it, decreasing the shame of it. You look at it, and then, you know, you can potentially work through it, where then you can just enjoy the content or not enjoy the content, right?
Yeah, I think it was nice that we touched on these topics as well. I also tried to create some content. I initially started these videos to help Turkish doctors because they were asking me a lot about, how it is to be a doctor in the UK. And I couldn't possibly answer all of their emails and messages. So I kind of created this document. And initially, I was almost ashamed of it because it wasn't perfect in my mind. So I didn't put it out there. I was just sending a Google Documents link.
Good for you. Good for you, though. Sending it out, putting it out there. You know, it's a work in progress. That's good.
Thank you. But sometimes, obviously, when you create content, when you're out there, you can get some people who are criticizing you a bit harshly, unnecessarily. Then it's hard to learn how to deal with that. It's not something I'm used to or I learn how to deal with. I think your insights about this helped a lot, thinking about like why they might be saying this and kind of seeing where, and also we can learn from it. Maybe they're saying the truth.
Right. And, you know, like sometimes people will say things and they don't really know you, and they don't really have like a picture of your life. They're just like looking at one little clip of you and they're giving something, you know, and this happens very commonly in social media. And I think
Yeah, yeah,
it's very painful for us empathic human beings.
yeah,
That with those people, how do we have like realize that they're probably, this says more about them than it says about you.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, if we can empathize with their internal distress and realize that their upsetness or their reaction is like, it's them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like, so
definitely.
some of these people are just, I mean, having had patients like this, they're miserable human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're literally like the most depressed, the most, you know, they, it's like they're just really suffering in their own little way, and they're very isolated and alone. And so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or incredibly jealous of you, right? So you have to kind of like keep, I mean, if you feel called, you feel called to give this message, right? To help people. It's like to encourage people, then it's like stay with that, right? That's more
Yeah,
important. Because
yeah.
I've gotten some bad iTunes reviews, and
Oh,
some of them are really painful. They're like, I'm just like, oh man, and it's like for a couple days, it's just like a stinger, you know. And I'll even share them to my Instagram just to kind of be like, hey, look at what someone wrote, and I'll get like 50 messages from people telling me like, oh, don't worry about it. I think from you especially. Like, Dr. Puder, it's wonderful. Don't believe them. And I'll be like, okay,
yeah. Don't believe them.
can't make everyone happy, right?
Yeah, impossible. Yeah, maybe there's jealousy. Maybe they just don't understand the content. You don't know what's going on there.
Maybe they had a bad experience with a psychiatrist. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe they're
yeah, yeah.
one of them was like, it seemed like a psychiatrist. It's
Hmm.
like, it sounds like, but it sounds like he kind of like doesn't have a platform. Maybe he would like his own platform
Hmm.
to kind of like, you know, speak his truth.
I wanted to
I
ask
encourage him
something.
to.
Sorry, have you ever had like a colleague or supervisor who almost felt uh, jealous of your empathy? Do you think so?
Yes, I can imagine one person right off the top of my head. It's like their affective empathy is not as high,
Mhm.
and they know because of it they can't like feel into other people's experience as much. Um, I I think jealousy is very common. I mean, look at like Cain and Abel. They're like brothers, it's like this archetypal story of like the jealousy between brothers and a murderous rage, right? That's underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Like as someone psychodynamically oriented, we say that everyone has a shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has this part of us that's capable
Yeah.
of doing horrible things potentially, you know, and mostly just in our dreams or
Mm-hmm.
mostly in our imagination, not in reality, but it's still there. And so, you know, how do we one, come into conscious awareness of it, and two, how do we overcome it? You know,
Yeah.
integrate that. So ideally a competitiveness would lead to action to help other people.
Yeah.
You know, like if you could be competitive, ideally it would be like to serve people, your community,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
But that's the hard work, so people sometimes choose to do the opposite. Yeah.
Well, people at that point, are they really choosing? It's like
Yeah.
they're these unconscious
Yeah.
forces are moving them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like even, well, I believe people have a free will
Mm-hmm.
but I see free will as a spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think if you're
I
conscious
agree.
of what's going
Yeah.
on internally, then you can have more of a spectrum, or you're further on the spectrum of free will. You have more choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So part of this process is developing the choice, and then it's like choosing to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it's one person reached out to me, and they say, you know, I am very selfish and I want to learn how to live for God. And he didn't mean like in like a normal traditional
Mm-hmm.
like religious sense, but like, how do I live for something other than myself?
Mm-hmm.
The highest calling, right? The highest
Yeah.
calling I could possibly have. How do I live for the highest calling?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the most meaningful thing you can possibly think about doing. And I think people realize that there's a meaninglessness in just a pure hedonistic selfishness, you know? Like read some
Yes. Yes.
Dostoevsky, read the Brothers Karamazov if you think the pure hedonism is the most pleasurable thing. It's a great story, kind of like comparing uh, these brothers, and one of them embodies hedonism, and one of them embodies like altruism and just pure goodness, and it's cool to see them interact. Okay, I'm getting off track.
No,
Get me
I
back
think
on track.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
We have a couple more minutes before I have to get off and
sure,
take
no
care of
worries.
my kids.
Okay, no worries. In that case, do you want to talk about any last words? Anything like you really want to, explain to like future doctors or current doctors?
Well, so since I'm talking to your audience, which are Turkish doctors, right?
Mostly Turkish doctors, yeah.
Mostly Turkish doctors, I would say, you know, just realize that the system is often a nefarious system that doctors come up against. And by nefarious, I mean like it's not built to help the patient. And so if you are stuck in one of those systems, just reorient yourself to understand that the meaning of what you do and the meaning of what you do in your studies, in your journey, is not for those people, those governing people who might be more nefariously oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about the people that you will serve and the people that you will impact. So if you can reorient yourself, I think that's probably the number one message for your audience.
Yeah.
To reorient themselves to a sense of meaning. And then to the challenge of Viktor Frankl, when he said, you know, that he had walked through the concentration camps and he had seen people giving out their last piece of bread. And so everything can be taken from a man, but the last of human freedoms to choose one's own way, given the environment, which is horrible. So even in the midst of a horrible environment, you can choose to continue to fight, continue to, you know, give up some of that self-preservation to other people. And that's meaningful.
Yeah.
Not that you shouldn't also take care of your own needs.
Sure.
And, you know, but there's something about the meaning of what we do as physicians, which is really amazing.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to do that, but it's possible. And I hope, you know, people who listen to this will be more interested in listening to your podcast. It really helped me find more meaning in what I do, and it helped me with a lot of tools. As you said, increasing empathy really definitely helps to connect with the patient better, and you feel their gratitude. I experienced that in my practice. I also enjoy your Sensorium, podcast a lot. Now I am more aware of, okay, I'm hungry, so my Sensorium is worse. I haven't slept well. I haven't gone to the toilet more. So sometimes the best thing you can do for your patient is to take a break, to increase that Sensorium, and that will increase your empathy, and that will make you a better psychiatrist, better doctor. And it becomes like a positive cycle as opposed to a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah. So think about it like sensorium is total brain function. It fluctuates. So a severe sensorium issue is like a hypoactive delirium, hyperactive delirium in like an elderly person. But we all have sensorium hits, right? And when our sensorium is low, we might not be as compassionate. We might not have as much empathy. So that's where I think exercise, taking care of our diet. I recently changed my diet and I have more sensorium later in the day. More salads, some lean meat. And then, how can we better our sensorium over time is through the exercise and through that sort of, strength training, cardio. That's how we better our sensorium over time. So there's certain meds, anticholinergic medications, benzodiazepines, which lower sensorium. And so I do a couple episodes on that. So it's something I'm passionate about. I don't think it was something that was emphasized to me. I've kind of created some episodes to sort of bring up this idea. And if you don't know what sensorium is, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's like you're in an argument with your spouse at the end of the day when you're both hungry, and it's like our sensorium is so low. It's like, why? It's like that's what's happening.
Yeah.
You're having a low sensorium argument.
Yeah.
It's not going to be productive. Go get some food. Go get some sleep. Argue in the morning.
Pause the argument.
Yeah. Or like I've heard of like Ambien arguments. It's like, don't argue when you're on Ambien, people. Come on, that's crazy. All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you. It's good
Thank you so much.
It's good to talk with you today, and
it's been really helpful. It's been amazing for me as well. Thank you. It's like so meaningful for me. Yeah, I will remember this for many years to come.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. Okay.
I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Talk soon. Okay, bye.